You're watching the final round of the 2025 International Chopin Competition. My name is Ben Lottie, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be joined first by my co-host, Rachel Naomi KUDO, and two special guests, and the three of which couldn't be more perfect to discuss Chopin's concertos. So let me just introduce the two. Maestro Antoni Wit, former Polish National Radio Symphony Orchestra director and former chief conductor of the Warsaw Philharmonic, conducted the final round of the Chopin competition in 2005 and 2010, including with my neighbor here, Rachel. And we're also joined by Martín García García, who is not only the bronze medalist of the 2021 competition, but also the Concerto Prize winner. So it's wonderful to have all of you here. Let's dive in. Maestro, can you talk about the most important things for a conductor when they're conducting a Chopin concerto, especially in this competition?
It depends when and which orchestra you conduct. The Polish orchestras, and especially Warsaw Philharmonic, they know this piece so well that I could tell they could follow the soloist even without conductor. The conductor should not disturb, maybe. And it's only a pleasure, because I conducted also both concerto about 200 times in my life. There are some different orchestration of both concertos, but I prefer the old one done by Chopin.
And Rachel, what was your experience like when you were sort of at the soloist bench with the Warsaw Phil to your left in 2005?
Well, I have to say, Maestro, that it's wonderful to see you again. I'm so honored, and I still remember your kindness and your warmth, because 20 years ago, I mean, certainly I was, even now, if I think that I would have to play on the stage, it's a big undertaking, and especially back then, for an 18-year-old and dreaming about possibly playing in the finals, but that dream came true, and it was with you. And I just remember how comfortable I felt, and I felt that you were really supportive of all of us. You wanted us to do well, and the orchestra as well. And I think that makes a big difference for us, because we are very sensitive, and we feel the energy of the audience and the warmth of the public here, but especially yours, of course, to lead the orchestra in such a sensitive and perceptive way was amazing.
Thank you very much, but don't forget the Chopin competition is maybe one of the most important events in our cultural life. I remember all competitions since 1955, and I was very happy to be able finally conductor of this competition.
I have to ask, between the two concertos, Maestro, do you have a preference or a favorite, or do you enjoy both of them?
Actually, I think pianists have a preference, that pianists prefer first concerto, because if you see the list of winners, mostly they played concerto number 1, so even they say the concerto number 1 can win the competition. The concerto number 1 is 7 or 8 minutes longer than concerto number 2, but both are beautiful.
We actually have some data on that. So apparently, since the modern period of the Chopin competition, 1949, when the full concerto was required, only a single gold medalist chose the F minor concerto, and that was our distinguished jury member, Dong Tai-son. But we're also sitting here with a man who won the concerto award with the so-called second concerto, although Chopin composed it first, the F minor. Martin, what do you see in this particular piece, and what made you gravitate towards it over the sort of larger, more virtuosic brother?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with Maestro Wit. We never played together, but it would be a real pleasure to play with him one day. And about the two concertos, yeah, everyone does have a favorite, and it's usually the first, that's for sure. In my case, that is really not the case. basically, I drool over the second concerto. I cannot help myself but enjoy so many special things that are on the second concerto that are not on the first. The first is great in form. The first is great for virtuosic, showing the audience how many things you can do with the piano. The second concerto, the real first, is really more about musicality itself, even though it's very virtuosic, the coda of the last movement. There are many virtuosic things, but they are more adapted to musical ideas. And on the contrary, the first one is more adapted to more virtuosic ideas. Both of them are wonderful. I have nothing to say, but I like the second.
I hope you keep some tissues near the piano if you're drooling while you're performing.
I sweat so much that it doesn't make a difference.
We want to keep things clean on stage.
May I tell something interesting? In the years 60s, it was used that when the orchestra played first concerto, it was a cut in tutti in first movement, the cut of 2 minutes, which is actually quite a big. But now it's no more this use, and even when I remember we played in one concert 4 times this piece, we played every time the whole introduction.
As it should be. Rachel, what's your favorite?
I have to say number 2. And I think we talked about this. It's probably also yours and Garrick Olson.
It's my favorite, and I asked the chair of the jury, Garrick Olson, what his favorite concerto is. He says he prefers the F minor. I don't know if he always felt that way or if it's once you get older, you sort of start gravitating towards it. But also John Rink, also on the jury, he sort of wrote the book on the 2 concerti. He prefers the F minor as well. And Martin, I wonder, do you play both concertis, or are you really just an F minor guy at the moment?
I am an F minor guy, also the tonality-wise.
But you know how the E minor begins. Could you compare these introductions? What makes the F minor introduction special, for example?
The first one, you know, I like the idea of Elsner, the Chopin's professor when he was a kid. Probably his only professor in his entire life. He said that the first concerto, so the second in the time-wise, the first concerto had a too much Beethovenian approach, and he just looked at the form, and he wanted to make an even more perfect, in a way, concerto, formally wise. To me, that takes away of Chopin's very intuitive approach to the piano, to composition in his early period. It's very intuitive. And in the first concerto, that's a bit taken away, especially in the big tutti, and especially in the first tutti. That is not something negative to say. That also brings something different from the piece.
But the entrance of the pianist is so special in the F minor, those D flats, right?
Exactly, yes. Also, the entrance is unlike anything that you could have heard in any other concerto before. The entrance of the first concerto is a good opening. It's an overture, but there is something less special about it. It's grandiose, it's beautiful. The second concerto is just special all the way around.
I think also the tonality for me, you know, F minor, E minor. E minor is also great. E minor partita, you know, E minor Opus 90 Beethoven Sonata.
The Grieg Sonata?
The Grieg Sonata. But F minor, the first Beethoven Sonata, F minor. I love that one.
F minor.
Appassionata.
Do we all prefer F minor as a key to E minor? I think as pianists, too, having the F sharp next to the E doesn't feel great when you play an E minor scale. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. The F minor scale is a pianist.
I love having flats. Yeah, 4 flats. Yeah,
and then the second flat people, I think. Absolutely.
Like you're right. The entrance. I think even like you said, the opening of the orchestra. You know, da-da-da-da. I mean, with strings. I mean, talk about poetry and something that's spoken and sung and very personal. You know, it draws you in. Maybe that's what we like, the intimacy, right? The second movement, there's nothing like that like heaven of 10 minutes for me. I know some people who've played that at their wedding with like string quartet. Yeah.
All that fits.
Yes,
All that
exactly.
fits, yes.
Yes.
Speaking of strings, could you talk a little bit about the orchestration and what your job is to sort of balance the orchestra with the pianist? I mean, it's a piano competition after all.
Actually, the orchestration of this piece is very simple. That is why after some musicologists wrote more complex orchestration, but now it's no use to do it. I think what Chopin did is excellent. You only should take care that orchestra should play very soft. And I remember when I conducted in the Chopin competition, Professor Jasiński, the chairman of the jury, at that time he asked me especially to play softly, that they could well listen and follow left hand of the soloist.
There's a moment that I know Martin and I like to talk about in the F minor concerto second movement. It's a bit of a dramatic, operatic recitative. There's nothing quite like it, except perhaps my thinking of the F minor Chopin prelude, which is a sort of recitativo as well. But Martin, tell us about this moment and what's special about it. I hope we can hear as many F minors in this final round as possible. But it's one of the most, dramatic moments in really all of Chopin's music.
Definitely, and it is written in a quite interesting way because he doesn't take away again form and tempo. He writes something that is seemingly very free, but he writes like he's writing a poem. He writes every letter how it should be pronounced. That's absolutely amazing. How you can be so exact in writing something so dramatic in music, and then put it on a score, make the pianist understand it quite easily because it's so easily understandable from the score, and something that is, again, so simple. The piano over one octave doing a recitativo and the orchestra just behind in a very tense tremolo. Something so simple turns into one of the most magical moments in the entire concerto. And again, it does draw to this prelude, but thank God he expanded it a little bit longer. It's not only 1 minute of a prelude, but it lasts a little bit longer, and it's fantastic each time.
Of course, the E minor is the most popular, and I think we should spend some time discussing it. Rachel, that was your chosen concerto.
Yes.
What made you choose the E minor concerto in 2005?
My answer is going to be a little bit simple, but at that time I hadn't played the F minor. And luckily for me, the first concerto that I performed with orchestra happened to be E minor. So I had that experience.
What's different about playing the E minor? Of course, it's longer. Talk about the passage work and just the differences from a pianist perspective, and I'm curious what our guests have to say about it as well.
Well, now that I've played both and performed both, I personally feel that number one is really the vehicle to show off the pianist. It's a little bit less chamber-like, right? A little bit less of a ebb and flow. I think that, like Martin said, the opening of the first movement is already so grand with the whole orchestra playing together. And Allegro Maestoso, I wanted to ask Maestro, has there been, since you've known this concerto for over 50 years or so, has there been, do you think, a change or an interpretation or ideas about this piece, tempi, for example?
Not very much. When I regard my performance, it's mostly similar. Of course, I do in the introduction also some rubatos because the pianist does it, so it should be always similar.
There is a tradition of playing that tutti in the E minor quite slow, maybe in more recent decades. Do you favor a sort of more movement to?
It depends what you mean by slow. Right, tempo should be right. And
may I ask you, could you show us how you conduct the beginning of the E minor tutti?
It starts with the upbeat, but I show with the right hand 1, 2, 3 to be sure that I start not only with one movement but 1, 2, thumping.
Now, one other request. pretend that Martin is your soloist and he's about to come in with his entrance in the E minor concerto. What are the few bars before that? Do they sort of settle down?
With the cello, yeah?
Yeah.
Da, 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 da.
How are you conducting just before the pianist arrives?
I'm slowing always down. I'm slowing always. But if the soloist requests me not to slow, I would not to slow, you know. But it can be many different ways. But the natural is to slow before the entrance of the pianists.
If the orchestra's playing too loud, what is your sign for? Do you do this or you?
Actually, Polish orchestras don't play it too loud. But I could hear the Chopin concerto in the world even played, but good orchestras when they played it, unfortunately, too loud, and conductors seemed to be happy with that.
Have you had any particularly special requests from soloists when playing these concertos that stand out?
I have one request. Just before the first rehearsal, I asked the soloist to play me some moments of the piece that I know how he does it. He does it very fast or very slow, that I could be on time with him.
Martin, just 20, 30 seconds. Can you talk about the feeling of being in the final round? What's going through the bodies and minds of these young soloists, and any encouragement for them?
Well, I don't know what goes on the minds of any of them, including myself. I always say that I don't remember a single moment of my finals. I have to go to YouTube to check it. I really don't remember anything. And that's just because the tension, the focusing is so great that maybe there is no space in your brain to create memories from the place. That's what happened to me. I'm of course exaggerating. I remember a few things, but it's such a. You're looking at yourself from outside. Maybe if you are lucky, that's what happens. Maybe Rachel can confirm this. It's difficult, but always I think that everyone who makes it to the finals of the competition and stands with Warsaw Philharmonic is such a beautiful moment, and you can only wish all the best to all the finalists, and it's a wonderful moment to be there. So.
Well, Martin, Maestro Wit, thank you for joining us with Rachel KUDO. I'm Ben Lottie. I hope you're enjoying the final round of this competition, and stay tuned in. There's a lot more music to come.